My name is Bill Bauer, and I am your food safety team leader at Vigon International. Today, we'll be going through an introduction of food safety. I want you to take a moment and picture someone that you really care about. Anyone. It could be a significant other, a family member, a child, whomever comes to mind. Would it worry you or would it cause you concern if that person who you care for fell sick, was in pain, was in agony, or even needed to go to the hospital? The truth is, on average, every 5 years, that person you are thinking about will likely suffer a foodborne illness from the foods they eat. This could be from anywhere, it could be from any time, but occurs through the improper handling, cooking, labeling, processing, storing, or any other means that contamination could occur in our food system. This severity could range from a ruined night on the porcelain throne to the hospital or even death with people with a weakened immune system. If we had the ability to ensure that this person never got sick from a food safety issue, would we put our best efforts forward to see this happen? Most people would think that they don't have much of an influence on our food safety system. But as an employee here, you have a direct influence over thousands of products that millions of consumers buy worldwide. We do actually have the ability to affect the food safety system, and it starts with the ideas and practices mentioned in this food safety introduction video. Before we go into our food safety programs at Vigon, we should have a background into who supports our cause and why it is important. In the early 1900s, not much attention was being focused on the safety of what people ate or what they drank. Therefore, there was a concern that some corporations were greedy enough to shortcut food safety efforts in order to maximize productivity and short-term profit. This was brought to the forefront in 1937 during the elixir sulfanilamide disaster. At the time, industry standard was to test new drugs on animals before releasing to the marketplace. In this case, the company took shortcuts for this step because it was too costly to wait for results. In a matter of months, hundreds of children died because the solvent which extracted the elixir sulfanilamide was acutely poisonous and caused kidney failure in children. Mothers and fathers who lost their children were pleading with the White House to set up standards to ensure that food and drug supplies were safe for use. In 1938, Congress passed the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act to oversee the safety of these important industries through enforcement by the FDA. Over the last 80 years, it has evolved to give us guidelines on ideas and practices to increase food safety in our own work environment. These guidelines are called GMPs, Good Manufacturing Practices, and CGMPs, Current Good Manufacturing Practices. This is where your understanding has a direct influence on our food safety system. Whether aware or not, you've noticed many of these GMPs in use. Let's take a generic Saturday, for example. You get up and go to the grocery store, and in the bulk candy aisle, you use a scoop to put some peanut M&Ms into a bag. After, you make a quick pit stop at Wawa to gas up your car and go to the bathroom. You notice the employees must wash hands sign before exiting. Next, you go to the hairdresser and notice a bunch of unused scissors bathing in the sanitizing liquid before getting your hair cut. In the afternoon, you are making chicken in a salad, where you're cutting both raw meat, which will be baked, and vegetables that will not. Take a second to look at each example and think why these may be important. The different scoops placed in every container in the bulk candy aisle separates allergen contact scoops from non-allergen contact candy. At Wawa, the washing of hands sign is a measure to protect the consumer from pathogens coming into contact with food that is being made at the food making station. At the haircutting place, the hairdresser sets a scissors and sanitizing solution because hair naturally contains bacteria that can be transferred from one person to another. Lastly, the dinner you make has a potential to be harmful if you use the same knife to cut raw chicken and then the vegetables. So what do all of these have in common? Each example prevents a hazard from going to where it shouldn't be. The dedicated scoops at the grocery store is designed to ensure that allergens do not go where they are not intended, which is coming into contact with non-allergen candy. The washing hands sign at Wawa is intended to remind the employee that bacteria from the use of the bathroom needs to be cleaned off before touching someone's food, minimizing cross-contamination of the bathroom environment to the food-making environment. The scissors at the hairdressers are soaked in sanitizing solution so that bacteria from a stranger's hair does not come into contact with your own hair. Lastly, the raw chicken that you cut before cooking could contain pathogens that will be transferred if you use it to cut the vegetables. In this example, either use a different knife to cut the vegetables or clean the used knife thoroughly. One of the largest risks to your health and consumer health is what we as employees bring into our work environments from the outside environment. The most notorious case of this occurred in the 2006 spinach recall from Dole Foods. There were a total of 205 confirmed illnesses and 3 deaths from raw spinach contaminated with E. coli. Dole Foods only tested the incoming spinach from the fields for pathogens. They did not do any environmental testing of their plant floor, nor any finished product testing, under the belief that if they accepted only clean raw materials, then their facility had no chance of being contaminated. Near this facility, however, there were a bunch of pig farms that had continual fecal runoff during rainy seasons. Employees would continually track E. coli in from their boots, while trucks would track E. coli positive tires into the manufacturing plant. Once the pathogen got into the plant, it eventually spread from floors to counters, from counters to hands, from hands to product, and then from product to customers. The employees were not trying to get people sick or trying to contaminate their products, but the lack of understanding and preventative measures to mitigate the risks were not present. I want you to think about the things you encounter in your everyday life. Do you have a dog? Do you walk in parks? Or have you ever had a sick person sneeze on you? These seemingly common everyday activities or occurrences could potentially spread pathogens in your work environment and your home. How will you minimize the risk? The best option to get rid of these sources of problems in a food environment is to provide uniforms for production personnel. At Vigon, production employees are provided 2 clothing lockers to store your personal belongings and uniforms, along with a shoe locker for footwear. The top part of the clothing locker should be where you store your street clothing and belongings, while the bottom locker is where clean uniforms will be stored for you. Separating these 2 lockers is important to minimize cross-contamination between your street clothes and your uniforms. Another reason for providing uniforms is to minimize any physical hazards that could fall off of personal clothing. The FDA classification of any physical hazard is an object between 7 millimeters and 25 millimeters. Items of this size are buttons on a shirt and most things stored in a chest pocket like a pen cap of a pen. These items have been known to be found through multiple food products and cause choking hazards, especially for children. For employees not working directly on the production floor, who wear a shirt that has buttons or pockets above the waist, you must wear a lab coat before going into production. Other items that must be worn in production are a hairnet that must cover all the hair on the top of your head and a beard net if you're in the powder room. Hair contains a significant amount of Staphylococcus bacteria, think a staph infection, that can infect our coworkers and our products. Hair nets minimize both bacteria and hair from getting into our products. Safety goggles are required but are used to protect your eyes from the reactive products in our work environment. Lastly, only a plain wedding band can be worn on the floor as jewelry. A life alert or religious necklace may be worn on the floor if under a uniform or shirt. It is always best to store your jewelry and electronics in your locker, as diamonds and emeralds could come loose and get lost in the facility, while electronics like phones and watches could explode due to the volatility of some of the chemicals we make. We talked in the previous slide about how to minimize potential of contamination from outside sources. This slide talks about how to minimize potential for contamination from inside the building. Inherently, there are parts of our everyday work lives that can cause bacteria or physical hazards to potentially come into contact with ourselves and the environment. The two facilities that are the most concerning are locker rooms and eating areas. We have already talked about street clothing and how we should change this clothing if working directly with products. But what about the environment that this clothing has already come into contact with at the facility? The locker rooms that we change in has to be treated as if it were not a food-safe environment. Also, our locker rooms contain our toilets that when flushed can spray bacteria and fecal matter into the air. This is the reason why locker rooms will never open directly into the manufacturing environment, and why it is important to wash our hands before going onto the production floor and after using the bathroom. Eating areas are just as important, and food cannot be consumed on the production floor, and tobacco products are prohibited on site. The first reason for having no food on the production floor is for your safety. We deal with very hazardous chemicals on the floor, and eating and drinking introduces a direct line of these chemicals into your stomach. Secondly, food when spilled creates a haven for bacterial growth and attracts rodents into the facility. Lastly, your mouth contains bacteria that gets transferred to your hands when eating with a utensil or not. Therefore, the transfer of bacteria from your mouth to your hands to the environment will contaminate the area and your hands. Employees need to wash their hands when returning from the cafeteria after eating to remove this bacteria. Washing your hands is only effective if you scrub your hands with soapy water for 20 seconds. See posted signs for hand washing instructions to keep your hands clean. In the production facility of Vigon, the cafeteria is the one main place for production workers to eat. The cafeteria has a TV, microwave, fridge, and coffee maker, which will make it easier to relax when eating and enjoy your breaks. This area is cleaned daily to prevent pests and bacteria from growing. The most costly food safety event that could happen for any company is a mandatory recall of products. This could cost a company not only the dollar amounts of retrieval and destruction of a particular product, but a probable loss of some or most customers forever. With less business coming in, many companies fail to recover after a recall, and the company downsizes or worse, it goes out of business. Along with losing jobs, people may have gotten sick or died before the recall was realized. 80% of the recalls that happen in the food industry are due to two main contaminants that get into the food products. These are allergens and bacterial contaminations. In 2009, the Peanut Corporation of America had the most extensive food recall in U.S. history when the bulk peanut supplier tested positive for salmonella. The recall spread to 361 companies that made 3,919 products, which food poisoned at least 700 people and killed 9. Half of the people that fell ill with salmonella were children. The FDA shut down the operation and the business closed 1 year later. The major reason for the contamination of salmonella for this company was inconsistent cleaning of equipment and housekeeping, as well as cross-contamination of environments and tools. Inconsistent cleaning led to bacterial growth in the facility, which then spread to primary contact areas through cross-contamination. An example of this would be using a scrubber to scrub your dirty toilet, then using the same scrubber to then clean your dishes. Do you think there would be things in your toilet that you don't want on your eating surfaces? The way that we can prevent this from occurring between shifts is by color-coding the utensils we use on the production floor. At Vigon, white tools are used to touch food-safe surfaces only. These include the insides of tanks, pumps, hoses, etc. Black tools are used for anything that can come into contact with non-food surfaces like floors, walls, and forklifts. Blue mops and brooms are used for cleaning of bathrooms instead of the black because of the pathogens that can be present in the bathrooms. Lastly, our facility contains manufacturing, processing, and repacking of allergens. About half of all the major recalls are due to undeclared allergens in our product. This occurs by improper cleaning of allergen equipment or cross-contamination from an allergen surface to a non-allergen surface. At Vigon, all tools that touch an allergen need to be read, and all tanks or vessels that have an allergen in them must have an allergen label. It only takes a few seconds to get the proper color tools for the job, but it could take years to recover if we have an allergen recall. This introduction to food safety is designed to share our rules of GMPs at Vigon, as well as to get you thinking about the importance and the many avenues that cross-contamination can happen in our work environments and everyday life. Realize that every time you step out onto the floor, that your actions positively or negatively affect the environment that we work in. You will be making choices every day that will directly affect the effectiveness of our food safety system. Whether you think about your own job security or the people that you care about, following these GMPs and actively thinking about cross-contamination will always result in a win for you and the company. If you ever have any questions or ideas for improvement, you can always contact me, Bill Bauer, or your immediate supervisor.